Napoleon and the Operational Art of War, Essays in Honor of Donald D. Horward. Edited by Michael V. Leggiere. Napoleon and the Operational Art of War, Essays in Honor of Donald D. Horward, is a Festschrift edited by Dr. Michael V. Leggiere. Kenneth G. Johnson, Jonathan Abel, Dennis Showalter, Alexander Mikaberitza, and others contributed essays to this book, which analyzes Napoleon's military methods. The Festschrift honors scholar Dr. Donald D. Horward, a distinguished Napoleonic scholar and recent member of the Florida State University faculty for 45 years. Dr. Horward recently passed away. Dr. Jeffrey Warrow offers the foreword of the work and provides context for Napoleon's military brilliance. He affirms that, quote, Napoleon excelled by doing unexceptional things with an exceptional speed, vigor, inspiration, and efficiency. Jonathan Abel and Jordan R. Hayworth each explore the fundamental principles that propelled Napoleon's military machine. Abel argues in his essay, The Prophet Guibert, that Napoleon owed much of his military success to Jacques-Antoine Hippolyte Comte de Guibert. Abel asserts that Napoleon, quote, inherited an army that had evolved from a long process of development stretching back through the Revolution to France's old regime. Abel remarks that Napoleon did not change his army radically, as significant military reforms had already occurred in the French army in the aftermath of its catastrophic failure at the Battle of Rossbach in 1757. Hayworth explores the development of France's military during the Revolution and argues that Lazare Carnot's leadership in late 1793 and early 1794 proved instrumental to creating the French way of war. At this time, France resorted to conscription, the creation of combined arms divisions, and a policy of non-negotiation toward the coalition partners. Napoleon benefited from these influential reforms initiated by French military thinkers. His first Italian campaign illustrated this new French operational art and truly embodied a new era in warfare. Hayworth maintains that, quote, more than any other revolutionary commanders, Bonaparte internalized the ideas of the Ancien regime military theorists so that the application of their concepts became nearly second nature. The ideas of the old regime military reformers and revolutionary leaders mingled with Napoleon's genius to create the new French way of war. The late Dennis Showalter claims that Napoleon's Jena campaign proved to be a major achievement in his operational art. In examining the early phase of the campaign, Showalter considers factors such as Napoleon's relationship with his chief of staff, Marshal Louis-Alexandre Berthier, the tense rivalry between the marshals, the significance of the corps system. Showalter further observes Napoleon's keen understanding of how and where to move and place units. He remarks, quote, securing other threatened areas with minimum force, the emperor concentrated a massive army in the decisive theater, concentrated it without gridlocking it. Showalter also concludes that the devastating blows delivered to Prussia in 1806 and the subsequent destruction of the Fourth Coalition illustrated Napoleon's ability to synchronize war-making's political, strategic, operational, and tactical levels. He explains, quote, it was an apogee, taking war to the furthest distance from its existing matrices. Hugh J. Davis considers the ongoing problems that Spain caused for Napoleon. He commences his essay with the line, quote, the war in the Iberian Peninsula was the war Napoleon did not want. Davies affirms that Napoleon's 1808 campaign in Spain highlighted the emperor's brilliant operational ability. The rebellion that occurred in Spain, a movement directed as much against Charles IV's heavy hand as it was against the French, ensured that Napoleon's army could never completely subdue the peninsula. Napoleon's fiscal and religious policies further exacerbated the rebellion against France. More importantly, Davies argues that the failure to completely destroy the Spanish army had grave consequences for the French. The British army only increased the danger to the French and encouraged the Spanish irregulars as well. He asserts that, quote, without a regular threat from the Spanish army, and then after 1811, the Anglo-Portuguese army under the command of Lord Wellington, Napoleon's marshals, divided and uncooperative though they were, would have been able to focus on pacification. Despite the fact that the French army proved successful against the Spanish regular army and the rebellion, the threat from both kept the French army's attention divided. With Napoleon busy in other parts of the empire, the marshals proved unequal to the task of fighting this peculiar war. Alexander Mikaberitza explores Napoleon's disastrous 1812 invasion of Russia and the breakdown of the emperor's operational art. Mikaberitza details the sheer size of the operational theater and reinforces the extreme difficulties that waging a war against the Russian Empire entailed. These challenges included maneuvering and commanding such a large, unwieldy force, extended lines of communication, and basic issues of food and supply. Mikaberitza affirms that, quote, furthermore, the fact that the French emperor was engaged in a two-front war against Russia in the north and the British and their allies in Iberia rendered the concentration of his resources and political, military, and diplomatic effort impossible. In addition to the direct problems stemming from the magnitude of the war, Mikaberitza argues that Napoleon was at less than his best during the invasion. Rather than demonstrating the drive and decisiveness that characterized his earlier campaigns, Napoleon frequently appeared hesitant and irresolute. He dithered for days at various points in the campaign, such as Vilna and Moscow, when determination, speed, and action were called for. Mikaberitsa states, "During the retreat from Moscow, the emperor rarely demonstrated his customary resolution or leadership, and neither Smolensk and Borodino nor Malosovets and Vyazma bear imprints of his martial genius." Michael V. Leggiere's aptly titled essay Prometheus Chained, 1813 to 1815, examines Napoleon's operations from the aftermath of the catastrophe in Russia to his final downfall at Waterloo. Leggiere maintains that Napoleon remained quite adept at maneuvering his army during the May 1813 Battle of Lutzen, in which Napoleon inflicted a devastating blow against the Prussians and the Russians. He contends, quote, "Napoleon's ability to move his units to the battlefield where and when they were needed to deliver maximum combat power remained unrivaled." Notwithstanding, the battle illustrated that Napoleon's armies had indeed learned the critical tactical lessons from the French. Leggiere asserts the prominence of the Reichenbach plan that the enlarged coalition adopted later that year. The plan called for the coalition partners to avoid direct action with Napoleon and retreat when he attacked. The other armies would then attack Napoleon's supply line and communications and confront the less talented marshals. This plan worked and culminated in the French defeat at Leipzig in October 1813. Leggiere argues that Napoleon remained a genius when it came to the operational art. However, the failure of his marshals to match his ability, his reliance on foreign military units after his French army had been destroyed, his failure to innovate tactically, and the coalition partners' numbers, as well as their ability to adapt and formulate effective countermeasures, ultimately spelled disaster for the emperor. Crucially, Leggiere asserts, Napoleon abandoned his operational objective of destroying the enemy's army in favor of geographic goals. He comments, quote, "After the loss of the Grande Armée in 1813 in Germany, not even Napoleon's mastery of operations could offset the coalition's vast numerical superiority in 1814. Other essays found in this work offer brilliant insights as well, such as Frederick C. Schneid's assertion that Napoleon's 1796 campaign against Piedmont Sardinia illustrated Napoleon's doctrine of constantly harassing the enemy. Kevin D. McCraney argues that British victory over Napoleon depended on a long-term strategy that encompassed many factors that worked to slowly erode the viability of the French Empire, and Robert M. Citino's observation that the German way of war owed as much to Napoleon as to German military thinkers. Each of the authors draw on considerable amount of secondary source material as well as documents, first-hand accounts, and memoirs. For instance, Abel's essay builds on works from historians such as Rory Muir, Ramsay Weston Phipps, and David Chandler. He also incorporates primary sources such as Marshal Michel Ney's memoirs and Guibert's Essai General de Tactique. Napoleon and the Operational Art of War, Essays in Honor of Donald D. Horward, is an informative collection of essays that highlights Napoleon's martial genius and the critical military themes that surround his empire. The Festschrift presents many of the Napoleonic War's facets and their intricacies and offers readers some brilliantly argued analyses. Throughout the work, impressive and wide-ranging scholarship does indeed honor Dr. Horward, and students of the Napoleonic period will learn much from this book.